Picture this. It is 1445 BC and thousands of people are gathered around a golden tent in the middle of a vast Arabian desert. This is the most important day of their entire year, but it is also the most terrifying because what is about to happen has never been done before in human history. 2 goats are brought forward and presented to the high priest. But these 2 animals are about to experience completely different fates. Ancient dice are rolled to decide which goat lives and which goat dies. The entire crowd watches in silence as the results are revealed and the priest receives his instructions from God. The first goat is immediately slaughtered. Its blood is collected carefully and the priest carries it inside the golden tent, the one place on earth where a massive pillar of cloud hovers, representing the living presence of God Almighty. The tension in the crowd is unbearable. Nobody is sure if the priest will even survive going inside. But here is where things get truly strange. The second goat did not die. Instead, the high priest walks over to it, places both hands firmly on its head, and begins to speak. As he speaks, something shifts in the atmosphere. The fear of the crowd turns into deep sorrow. People begin weeping openly and loudly across the entire camp. Then someone takes this second living goat and leads it slowly away from the camp, far out into the empty wilderness. This goat is not being freed. It is being deliberately sent to a dark and terrifying force that the ancient Israelites believed lived in the desolate and dangerous parts of the desert. This is one of the strangest commands in the entire Bible. So why on earth did God command his people to send a goat into the wilderness every single year? The answer to that question will unlock the meaning of the entire Bible for you. But to understand it properly, we need to go back 6 months earlier to a moment that changed everything for the nation of Israel completely and permanently. 6 months before this strange ritual, God did something he had not done since the Garden of Eden. He told the Israelites to take the gold and jewels they had received from Egypt after their miraculous freedom from slavery and use it to build something extraordinary, a portable temple where his terrifying and glorious presence could physically rest among his people. Now God did not need a building to live in. He is everywhere at all times. But this golden tent, known as the tabernacle, would serve as a physical location where God's presence could dwell right in the middle of the Israelite camp. It was an act of love and intimacy unlike anything the world had ever seen from God before this moment. Before the tabernacle was built, the only person who could access God directly was Moses. Moses would climb Mount Sinai and return carrying the words of God to the people. If anyone else attempted to approach that mountain, they would be destroyed instantly. God was accessible but dangerously, powerfully, overwhelmingly holy in a way people could barely survive being near. Imagine the excitement when the tabernacle was finally completed. The people had poured their most precious gold and jewels into building this place. They had followed every single instruction God gave them to the finest detail. This was supposed to be the greatest celebration in their history. But something devastating was about to happen that nobody saw coming at all. The moment the tabernacle was fully set up, a giant pillar of cloud descended and covered the entire tent. God's glory filled it completely. And in that moment, not even Moses himself was allowed to enter. The presence inside was too powerful, too holy, too overwhelming for any ordinary human being to survive walking into unprepared and uncleansed. The tabernacle was divided into 3 distinct sections. First was the outer courtyard, the area inside the gates but outside the tent itself. This was where animals were sacrificed on the altar. Second was the holy place, the main room visible through the entrance where priests burned incense before God daily, requiring strict preparation and ritual cleansing before entering. Third and most sacred was the most holy place, a small chamber on the western side of the tabernacle hidden completely behind a thick heavy veil. Inside this chamber sat the Ark of the Covenant, a wooden box covered entirely in gold containing the stone tablets of God's commandments. This was the exact location where the living presence of God rested permanently. Before Aaron and his sons could begin their priestly duties, they went through 7 full days of preparation outside the entrance. Bulls and sheep were sacrificed. Their blood was sprinkled on the men. Moses washed them with water and dressed them in special white robes. Aaron received a golden crown on his head. He would stand in the gap between an unholy people and a perfectly holy God. On the 8th day, something breathtaking happened. Moses told Aaron and his sons that God was about to appear to them personally. They followed every detailed instruction for the sacrifices on the altar outside the tent. Then God's own fire burst out from the most holy place and consumed everything on the altar completely in one dramatic moment. The people erupted, they shouted praises, they fell face down on the ground, overcome with joy and worship. The God who created the entire universe had agreed to move into their desert campsite. It was the most joyful moment in the entire history of the nation. But within seconds that joy was about to be shattered into pieces by something completely unexpected. Right in the middle of the celebration, Aaron's 2 sons, Nadab and Abihu, went inside the tabernacle, lit their censers, and began offering fire to God. But the Bible calls it strange fire, fire that was unauthorized, fire that God had not commanded or approved. They did something well-intentioned perhaps, but completely outside the boundaries God had clearly established. God's fire came out of the most holy place a second time. But this time it was not to accept an offering. This time it consumed Aaron's 2 sons where they stood. Imagine witnessing the most joyful day of your life turn into the most terrifying moment in seconds. 2 bodies lay lifeless inside the tent as the entire nation stood in stunned silence. God then sent a message to Aaron through Moses. He said, "Those who come near me must treat me as holy, and before all the people I will be glorified." This statement is the key that unlocks everything. It is the entire reason God gave the strange goat ritual, and it is the reason the purity laws that follow this tragedy exist in the first place. Right after this tragedy, God begins issuing laws about cleanliness and purity that seem extremely random and strange to modern readers. Laws about touching dead animals, laws about bodily fluids, laws about skin diseases. At first reading, these laws feel like punishments for natural human experiences. But that is a complete misunderstanding of what God was actually doing for his people. There were 4 tiers of impurity in the Israelite system. Tier 1 included things like touching a dead animal or normal bodily fluid loss, things that happened regularly to nearly everyone. The consequence was simply being considered unclean until the following morning, which meant no participation in tabernacle activities for that short period of time throughout their daily lives. The blood of the first goat represented pure life, being offered to cleanse God's sacred space of accumulated death. If death is what pollutes God's holy presence, then the cleansing agent must naturally be life itself. The blood was not a payment, it was a purification. A pure innocent life given so that an impure people could continue living in the presence of a holy God. The second goat carried all the sins of the people away from God's presence and deposited them at the devil's doorstep in the wilderness. The Hebrew name for this is azazel, meaning strong spirit, believed to be the ruler of all the demons of the desert wilderness. This goat was a living garbage truck carrying all the sin of the nation far away from God's holy camp. But this entire ritual was pointing forward like a shadow pointing toward the real object casting it. 1500 years after this ceremony was first performed, a sinless man was born into the world. Everything the 2 goats represented was preparing the world for one person. Every drop of blood, every confession of sin, every goat sent into the wilderness pointed directly toward Jesus Christ. Just like the first goat, his blood, the blood of a perfectly pure and sinless life, was shed to wash away the sin and impurity of every human being who would ever believe in him. The first goat foreshadowed Jesus dying on the cross so that the presence of God could make its home not in a golden tent, but in the hearts of ordinary broken people like you and me. And just like the second goat, Jesus was taken outside the walls of the holy city Jerusalem and crucified beyond the gates. All the sin of the entire world was laid upon him on that cross. The prophet Isaiah wrote it 7 centuries before it happened. He was wounded for our wrongdoing, crushed for our failures. The punishment that brought us peace fell completely upon him alone. The tabernacle rituals were never the point in themselves. They were always a living visual lesson acted out year after year for 15 centuries, preparing the hearts and minds of God's people to recognize and receive the one who was coming to fulfill everything the goats could only symbolize. The Day of Atonement was never really about goats. It was always about Jesus all along. 2 goats. One day, one extraordinary purpose that echoes through all of human history. The blood of the first opens the way back to God. The departure of the second carries your sin so far away it can never be brought back against you again. This is the heartbeat of the entire Bible, a holy God who loves his people so completely he would rather sacrifice everything than live without them.